So you're thinking about moving to Central Park, or maybe you already live here and this is the first time you're going to put your child into the DPS Central Park schools, and you hear from other people that you've got to tour the schools. What does that mean? How does it work? We're going to cover all of that in this video. Touring schools, that's what we're going to cover in this video. And again, I brought in the expert on schools, Keely Buchanan with PreparingforDenverKindergarten. If you didn't see some of our earlier videos with Keely, she has a whole business just about helping parents figure out and navigate the whole school enrollment process. So whenever I get questions from clients, I'm always leaning on Keely. So that's why she's here for the videos. Okay, so Keely, give us the basics of touring schools and what people need to know.
All right, it's a big topic, but let's talk basics. So if someone says, hey, have you started touring schools yet? And then you panic, what we're talking about is you want to get into the school if you can. You want to look around, you want to see how it makes you feel, you want to see classrooms, you want to see the gym, you want to see the playground. If possible, you want to see the kids in the school. How are they interacting with the teachers? What does it sound like? What does it look like? It's important that you combine the data and the research end of school research, which is where I come in to help, with the actual visceral reaction you have when you get into a school. So touring is really important and can help you narrow down your list of schools. If you live in Central Park, you have 6 elementary schools within the Central Park enrollment zone. It's important that you live here, if you live here, that you look and consider all 6. That's where you want to start with your touring. Now, you can tour 3 different ways right now. First and foremost, and best case, is an in-person tour. You reach out to the school, and each school handles it a little bit differently, and you find out when and if are you offering in-person tours. You can schedule that. Some schools offer it a certain day a week at a certain time. Some schools allow you to sign up online. Some schools it's a little bit different. So you reach out to each of those schools, and then you book an in-person tour ideally.
Quick question on that. Is this
Yes.
throughout the whole year, or are there seasons to where this is like the window's open to tour a school?
Great question. We ideally want to start touring in October, the year before your kiddo starts. So regardless if they're going to go into pre-K 3 or ECE 3 or ECE 4 or kindergarten, or if you're moving in the middle of the year and they're going to go into 2nd grade, ideally you would start in October the year before they start so that you have all of October, all of November, all of December, and all of January to tour whatever schools you need so you don't have to hustle and hurry.
And because that, in the end of January, is when you're going to be putting in your, here's the schools that I want in the order you want.
Yes. Okay. DPS Choice opens in mid-January and closes in mid-February. So I would prefer you get that done by the end of January so you don't have to hustle or worry. And that gives you 4 solid months to be able to tour. Some people tour all their schools in one day. Don't recommend. Some people tour 1 school a month, but if you start in October, it gives you a solid 4 months to make that happen.
From my perspective, there's 6 schools or whatever. If it were me, I would think, okay, I'm going to narrow it down to 2 or 3, tour those, eliminate the other 3 just based off what I see online, and that'll probably be fine. I don't know. What's your take? It just seems a little extreme to do 6. I feel like I've seen a lot of clients that get overly worked up and excited about this. And then they always end up happy no matter which school they go to.
Yeah, that's a great point. The biggest through line of any time we talk about schools in Central Park is they're all kind of amazing. There are 6 in your elementary school zone. All of them are unique. You probably will be just fine and your kiddo will thrive no matter where you go. My best practice is to recommend not necessarily that you tour all 6, but that you consider all 6.
Okay.
Depends on where you live in Central Park. It depends on what you're looking for. You're at a school that goes through 8th grade. Some of the schools don't. Some of them have different bell times. Some of them have uniforms. Some don't. So the best practice if you live in the Central Park enrollment zone is to consider or start from that list of 6 and then narrow it down from there. I would love to help parents get to 5 or less when it comes to public and private, but I will give you an extra 1 or 2 if you live in Central Park because you're starting with 6.
So you've decided which ones you're going to go see. Who should go to this? Who should go to the tour?
Yeah, so if I back up just a bit, we've got in-person tours ideally.
Okay.
And these days we also potentially have some live virtual touring happening with public and private schools. That's something you book with the school directly. And then a lot more schools, public and private, are now doing videos so that you can just go on the website and watch an overview of the school on your own time.
Okay.
So once you narrow that down and you're going to be able to do an in-person tour, it is very, very important that you go with your partner if that applies. It's very difficult, and I see this happen every year, where one parent goes to a tour, spends that hour, they do all their research, they totally watch this video, and they know what to ask and look for. Then they come home and they talk to their partner, and their partner wasn't on that tour.
Yeah.
So then you're trying to explain what you saw and how it made you feel, and then you're probably going to go back and retour it with them anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like you have a story.
No, I just feel like this. What would happen is I'd go home and then Mandy would ask me very basic questions that I should have known, and I'd go like, yeah, I didn't ask that. I didn't ask that, and then she would have to go do the tour.
Yes,
I think this is good advice.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Also, if you're going to tour, let's say 5, and then when, let's say 4 months later, when you're ready to sit down and make a decision, you're like, oh wait, I forgot all the differences between the 5 that we toured. Like, what was that one? So there's some best practices we can follow there. But the biggest one is go with your partner.
Yeah.
Make the time to do that so you both take the 1 hour instead of, each of you having to go on your own. I also get a question quite a bit of, well, do I bring my child, right? So there's some privilege in that statement because if you have childcare or not. But for the most part, I don't recommend bringing your kiddo on the tour. Unless it's a baby that you can wear. It's very difficult to manage your child who's running around in this new school space and attempt to take notes and ask questions and see the classrooms. So a best practice, if it's available to you, is to only go with your partner, again, if possible, and leave your kiddos at home or do it while they're in daycare.
So you've laid it out when we do these tours and who should go to these tours, but what actually happens at the tour?
You take the time to call the school, set up the tour, get on the schedule, you take off work if necessary, you get there, and now what? So there's a couple of things to consider. First and foremost, know that most in-person tours are going to be done by the principal, the assistant principal, sometimes someone in the office. So just know that sometimes you'll get all of your questions answered and sometimes that person won't necessarily have all of that data. So we're going to talk a little bit about follow-up later as well. I like to recommend that the families I work with give every school 3 strikes. A bad tour is only 1 strike. Not all schools understand that the tour can be your barrier to entry and can really impact what you think about that school. But when you get to the school and you're ready to do the touring, know that typically they're going to show you around. They're going to show you some classrooms. They're going to show you the gym and the auditorium and the playground. They want to show you the school. If you're lucky, you're there during school hours, so you can actually look into a classroom where there are kids in it and see what that dynamic looks like. Pro tip: raise your hand, advocate for yourself, or bring a friend who is, not scared to speak up and say, actually, hey, you know what? My kiddo's going into kindergarten. Can we see all 3 kindergarten classrooms? So that you can look at some of the differences. When you're in a classroom, you want to think, how does this make me feel? Do I have like a reaction to this classroom? You know your kiddos better than anybody else. Some of us have kiddos who have to be in a very structured, organized classrooms with right angles. Some of us have kids who cannot survive in those classrooms and they really need to be in a much more flexible, creative classroom. So being able to look at all of the classrooms for the grade that your kiddo is going into, and ideally being there again during the school day so that you can watch them at recess and you can see the kids in the classroom and poke around in the school. You want to take notes if you can, either on your phone or with a pen so that you can come back to them later. When I work with clients with my classes or with private consultations, I've actually created what I call like a scorecard, but it's a really easy way to give a grade to about 24 different things that you look at when you're touring.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to get mixed up with all the schools you're touring. So if you're going to be doing this, let's say over 4 months, if you do the scorecard, you print it out and you complete it every time, then when it's time to sit down and think about choice, you can put the kids to bed, you can get some wine, you can sit down, and you can get your 4 or 5 scorecards together and go back over that data.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels with real estate actually. It's really good for people to go see the homes. Even if they think, it's not perfect, it's not the one, let's go see it. It just builds perspective. The more things you see, then when you find the right one, you really know it because you felt several of them. And you can't tell things online. You can look at like the ratings and all these different things, but it's like going to a home. You really got to go in it, kick the tires,
I love
see the
that.
whole thing.
Yeah, boots on the ground. You got to get in there. And even if someone tells you, oh, this school is really good or this house is really great, you still need to go in and see that.
Yes.
I have clients every year who don't choose a school that everyone said was really good, and they choose a school that people were not as excited about because they went into the school and they were like, this is the school for me. This feels like the place where my family can be.
That's why we have all these different options.
Yes.
So you mentioned follow-up. What's important to know about the follow-up after you've done your tour?
Yeah, so it's, again, easy to get overwhelmed or to have the schools start to blend together. The good news is, again, recap, if you're in Central Park in the enrollment zone, all 6 of these schools are very unique and are wonderful. So it really just depends on sort of your pros and cons for each. But when you follow up, when you're done with your tour, let's say even if you got every single one of your questions answered, you could have a lot of questions around data or their test scores or their demographics. You could have questions around funding and specials, so arts and music, etc. But to follow up, what I recommend is you just send a quick email. You send an email to the principal. If there's an assistant principal, that's a great pro tip. Send a quick email and say, hey, I'm in the Central Park enrollment zone, or I'm moving there soon. I'm really excited. I completed a tour. I had just a few unanswered questions, or a few questions that came to me when I was done touring, or that I had a follow-up for. Spend just a few minutes, keep it under 5 questions, send that email, and then see what happens. Because part of this, you said it's kind of like real estate. It's a little bit like dating too. It's like, are they going to get back to you?
Yeah.
How quickly do they get back to you? What answers did they give you? And how do those responses make you feel? So a follow-up best practice is to not only keep your notes separate for each school so you can come back to them, but just shoot a quick email to those school leaders, or if you connected with a teacher in particular, or the person who did the tour will probably follow up with you. You could follow up with them as well. And then see when those responses come in, and then what they have to say. And then you've got a contact on site for each of those schools to follow up if you need it.
This is great information. I hope it helps you guys. I know it would have helped me 10, 11 years ago, whenever I started that process, 8 years ago. Anyway, 2 more tips before we go. I would say, first, if you're a little confused about the whole enrollment zone and like, what are we even talking about? You're overwhelmed. Go back and watch the other video that we did with Keely, just explaining the whole enrollment zone and the process of selecting a school in the Central Park area. I'm going to put a link to that in the description below. And then my second and final tip is use Keely. So Keely's whole business is around helping you parents navigate the process, figure it all out. She teaches classes specific to Central Park if you want to do a group setting thing, or you could do private one-on-one lessons and just exactly get your questions answered. So lots of options. I will put the link to Keely's website and I think your Facebook page below as well. So you've got all the resources there. So Keely, thanks for your time. We'll do it again soon. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.